In fact, many believe the tide changed when it was even filed as a criminal charge against him. People started to lean in more. But now that he's won, does the next set of events even matter in terms of what the judge will do?
Well, look, I think it matters because it's another reminder that radical Democrat political activists abuse the criminal justice system in New York, all to create a political talking point. Look, Ellie is exactly right, our legal analyst here. This would have never been charged this way if it weren't Donald Trump and he weren't running for president. Should have never been charged this way. He should have never faced this. It was all done so they could call him a convicted felon during the campaign, which of course they succeeded at. What they miscalculated is that the American people knew from the get-go that it was partisan politics, and they soundly rejected this in November. So Trump's, I guess, going to get one more bite at the apple here to make the point that these Democrats in New York elected, Alvin Bragg elected, Marchand elected, these people are elected by the people, and they took their jobs in public service and used them for political ends instead of using all of their time to throw the bad people in New York, which there are plenty of them on the streets, in jail. That's the real lasting impact of this, the abuse of the system for political purposes when New York City is descending into a hellhole right now.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to follow up with some of the mainstream liberal media reactions to the biggest news of yesterday involving Judge Marchand, the woke Manhattan judge that presided over the hush money case. Him coming out and deciding to sentence former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, before the inauguration. Now, the reason why Judge Marchand is doing this is because he wants to solidify Trump as a convicted felon before the inauguration. Okay, this is all for the media. This is all for the Democrats. This is all for the virtue signal of having Trump be a convicted felon. That's what this is. Okay, however, he's not actually really going to punish Trump in any real meaningful way outside of labeling him a felon. Even though we all know that this trial was rigged and that it was a sham. Even Eli Honig of CNN's own chief legal analyst, has essentially said so himself, and that there's a good chance that this could be overturned on appeal, as I explained to you guys yesterday.
Assistant USA for the Southern, so the SDNY, I almost called it the Sovereign District, as you often refer to it, Ellie. I'm going to call it the SDNY instead. All right, Ellie, you and I predicted the idea there wasn't going to be much of a penalty, if any at all, but there's no jail time, no community service, no fines as we know it now, nothing. What do you think of this decision, given you didn't think the case should have been brought in the first place?
Well, it's an unsatisfying outcome, I think, for certainly the district attorney, but I think it points up ultimately that this was a case of prosecutorial overreach. I don't think there's any real way around that at this point. I think Alvin Bragg would defend this case by saying he looked carefully at the facts and the law, and he believed it was necessary to impose accountability. And I should say, as I always do, Alvin and I were former colleagues at the aforementioned Southern District of New York. He was a colleague and a friend. But I think the vast majority of the American public now views this case as I do, which is that it was a colossal, world historic episode of prosecutorial overreach. He took this case, which the feds had rejected, which the FEC had rejected, which his predecessor as DA had chosen not to charge and later said would have been a huge problem. He crafted a charge against Donald Trump that has never been brought against any other person in American history. He took an expired New York State misdemeanor, piled another expired New York State misdemeanor on top of it, and piled a federal election fraud violation in state court on top of that. Nobody's ever been charged or convicted that way before. And so now the ultimate result of this, Laura, legally is essentially a big fat zero. And politically, I think it backfired badly on Alvin Bragg and on Democrats.
Clearly, Bragg would disagree. And of course, the prosecutors who endeavored to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. But let's set aside for a moment the views you have on this issue and what the judge actually said. The judge didn't view it in this same way. The judge's rationale was looking essentially at the fact that this is a president-elect, but also obviously looking at the balance he'd have to strike between how to actually get accountability in the form of financial payment, one, or also to hold him accountable versus via jail time. His decision, as you know, Ellie, he considered the immunity argument. and the DOJ's policy of not prosecuting a sitting president, but that the idea of trying to preserve the finality of it. That statement, I think people are kind of scratching their heads about. What does he mean to preserve the finality of it, given that there'll be appeals and there are ongoing appeals here?
Yeah, so one thing Judge Merchan said in his opinion, which I think is spot on, is nobody really knows. We've never been in this situation before with somebody weeks away from becoming president, and can that person be sentenced? And I think in light of that, Judge Merchan reached a reasonable outcome, which is let's try to move this thing as far along as we can. And in fact, by actually sentencing Donald Trump next week, assuming it goes off as planned, that actually will enable Donald Trump's legal team, if they so choose, to pursue an appeal, to appeal on the exact basis that I just laid out. You can't charge someone with a federal campaign violation in state court. And I think they have a pretty decent chance of winning. So by getting Donald Trump sentenced, what you do is put that chapter of this case behind us and allow Donald Trump, he's really doing Trump's team a favor in a sense of saying, if you do want to pursue your constitutional appeal while you're president, you can go ahead and do it now.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. CNN's best and most honest legal analyst, Eli Honig, saying the same thing that I said when the news first broke yesterday, which is that, hey, this is kind of a good thing for Trump. The judge is stuck between a rock and a hard place. If he tries to actually throw Trump in jail, which there's no doubt in my mind, that's what they actually want to do, then he may spark a constitutional crisis. And that could backfire in the sense that it undermines the conviction. Okay, and that is the last thing that they want, okay, for us to be sitting here having a conversation going into Inauguration Day about the president-elect or the future president of the United States being in jail, right? Again, could you guys imagine the conversations that the media would be having had this dude sentence Trump to jail, right? Which, you know, hey, it's not over yet, right? Trump hasn't been sentenced yet, so who knows? I mean, I guess maybe the judge could change his mind, but the judge is essentially indicating that he's going to take the easy route, right? In the sense that he wants to solidify Trump's felony status, okay? And then just kind of have that be a thing and take that as the W so that Democrats and the liberal media can say that Trump's a convicted felon when he gets sworn in, right? This is all about symbolism now at this point. And this is how bad Democrats have lost. They've taken so many L's that they're now defaulting to symbolic victories, right? That's what this is, because the actual point was to stop Trump from becoming president again. That didn't work. So now they settled for, well, at least Trump is a convicted felon, right? As they cry over Trump being their president again. Okay, so that being said, we have to react to this panel of Trump deranged liberals, or at least maybe one or two liberals on this panel who are upset with the fact that the judge is not actually really punishing Trump. Okay, that the judge is not sentencing Trump to prison or jail or even giving Trump a fine, right? I mean, straight up, the judge isn't really punishing Trump at all, and these people are upset. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Is this a kind of Goldilocks decision by the judge here to give people who want Trump to have consequences a conviction that is upheld, but not have to deal with, you know, a sentence which, frankly, was unlikely to actually happen given that he's about to be the president of the United States?
No, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. I think this is a slap in the face to the judicial system. We tell the jurors when they come into that room that your job is very important. This is very serious. We expect them to pour through the information, which they did. They came back with a decision, and now the judge is saying, essentially, it doesn't matter. You found him guilty, but I'm not going to assess any penalty at all. I'm not saying you had to put Trump in jail. That's not likely or reasonable. But there are fines that could have happened, up to $170,000 in fines. Why not assess that and say you were found guilty? Here's a consequence so America can know that if you do something wrong, there will be a penalty to pay.
Well, I mean, listen, here's the issue. The point of the charges against Trump, the point of the case was to stop Trump from becoming president, right? And that in and of itself is a slap in the face to the criminal justice system, because it should have never been brought, according to Eli Honig, right, who is CNN's chief legal analyst, okay? Also, Alvin Bragg's buddy, colleague, coming out and saying, yeah, this was some BS, okay? You should not have done this. This ain't right. So I think that it's fitting that there is no punishment for Trump, although I do think Trump being a convicted felon is punishment. I mean, that label of convicted felon, it is a label that, nobody really wants. Nobody wants to, have the label of felon. But, outside of that, a fine or jail, anything like that, let's be real. Just considering the fact that this case and the conviction in and of itself is fraudulent. I think that it is appropriate that there is no real punishment for Trump outside of the felon label, which I even think that's too much. I think he should fight that tooth and nail as well too. But I think that it's fitting that there is no real punishment due to the fact that the case was fraudulent in the first place.
Brian?
Listen, I think what we're going to learn through this case more than anything else is the most helpful to President Trump's election. Because when you saw the indictment take place, you saw a lot of money come in. You saw the party consolidate against around President Trump, and that was a good thing. And remember, the original purpose of what at least Trump world felt that this was happening was to try to damage President Trump in his presidential run. Hopefully, this will take him off the sideline. Democrats were all over the country saying, if you look at the polls, he's going to lose this much Republican support if we can just get this conviction. And it backfired on him. So I'm not surprised when we get to the very end that it just turned out to be a farce from, it's a farce at the end, just like it's a farce from the very beginning.
Facts. Exactly. And that's what I said. That's why it's so fitting that it ends this way, because it was a farce from the beginning. It's a farce at the end.
Which it was a witch hunt from the very
to
beginning.
Dante's point, there was a jury trial. And he was convicted.
But he was convicted in what really was a witch trial. I mean, the whole thing from the very beginning was politically motivated. And like you said, I mean, during the election, we saw how the American public felt about it. They felt that it didn't matter. And my question is, why even have him appear if the judge has already made a decision that there isn't going to be any kind of fine, there's not going to be a probation, there's not going to be any jail time? What's the point?
He said he can appear virtually, which again, you're giving that concession. I understand it's the incoming president of the United States, but I don't want the point to be lost that there was a jury trial where that jury sit through and heard evidence, and whether or not Trump should have been charged, that's not what we're talking about. He was, and he was found guilty based on the evidence. So you can't ignore that and say it was a political witch hunt because a jury said he did something wrong, but now the judge is saying he won't be punished.
The judge, I mean, he is not saying that the jury's verdict is invalid. He's just saying, of the options I have available to me, I'm going to choose the one that has basically no penalty. Isn't that an option that would have been available to him anyway?
No. I mean, I don't know of an option where someone is convicted of 34 felonies and at the end of it you say, okay, all right, we got you, but there's nothing that's going to happen to you as a result. That's just not how our legal system works, and we don't want people to think it works that way.
First-time offender, no priors?
For all of the talk of Donald Trump being the victim of the weaponization of our criminal legal system, he has consistently been treated more generously than the average American would. To the point just made, who do you know who's been convicted on 34 felony counts, doesn't even have to pay a fine, to say nothing of some prison time?
Well, who else would have ever been charged in the circumstances?
Nobody.
Exactly, nobody. And also on top of that, we're talking about a future sitting president, okay? I mean, these people are boo-hoo-wine. Hey, the judge didn't fine him. The judge didn't throw him in jail. Trump gets special treatment, blah, blah, blah. Again, charges should not have been brought in the first place. They would not have been brought had the person not been Donald Trump, okay? But the thing is, again, what the judge realizes is that any type of actual real penalty against Trump, again, it just puts the case or the conviction in more jeopardy, right? I mean, it's already probably going to be overturned or appealed, okay? But you don't want to give the Trump team more ammunition to essentially appeal the sentencing before the sentencing comes down, right? And I don't know if these people actually understand the rationale behind it, because let's be real. If you slap Trump with $100,000 fine, realistically, that's not really a punishment either. I mean, Trump is super rich, so it's almost like that ain't nothing either, right? So why even do that if you know that, one, is not really going to hurt Trump, and then two, you're just increasing the risk of Trump being successful in appealing the sentencing? The reason why the judge is essentially not doing anything, he's doing the sentencing this way, including allowing Trump to do it virtually, is to lessen the chances of the sentencing being appealed, right, successfully.
But this is how we treat white-collar criminals in our country. They walk away scot-free. This has been traditional. This isn't any surprise to us.
Well, they don't. After they've been convicted, they don't walk away scot-free. They have to have some. There has to be some consequence, whether it is a financial or some combination of.
But it's consistently
financial
smaller than any other type of criminal.
Or some prison time. And so here's a classic example. And by the way, this has been appealed on at least one occasion. I mean, he was convicted of things that a court has found beyond this trial court to be a perfectly valid thing to be convicted of in the state of New York. And so for all this talk about a witch hunt, weaponization, no one can plausibly dispute that he committed the crimes that he was convicted of. They may not like that he was prosecuted, but the fact is, he did the things that he was convicted of.
Steve Chung is saying...
in the Democratic, he wouldn't have got convicted in any other city that is a Republican city or even slightly leading moderate city. It's a jury of Democrats.
But Brian, doesn't that undermine your very point? If you're suggesting that Republicans would have let him off, isn't that in itself political?
Defense counsel
it's very, very political. But that's my point is Trump has broken all these barriers and he continues to do it. But now the Democrats try to do it with the weaponization of our judicial system, and it just backfired.
My question is, why not just take the win?
Once again, we have Abby Phillip proven to be the dumbest journalist on television, bar none. Well, again, the reason why you don't just take the win is because you don't want a felony on your record, right? You don't want to give the mainstream liberal media, people like Abby Phillip and the rest of these CNN panelists that are Trump deranged, the ability to continue to say that he's a convicted felon, first and foremost. But also on top of that, when people say that this conviction would not have happened, the case would not have been brought in any other jurisdiction outside of Manhattan, they're not saying that to say that, well, every other jurisdiction is rigged in favor of Trump. No, what people are saying is that this specific jurisdiction, this specific case, these specific charges only are happening due to the fact that you have these Democrats that have campaigned on going after Trump, right? They essentially looked into Trump to find a crime, okay? That's what they did. And then they went after him, okay? In any other place in this country, for the most part, that's not happening. It would not have happened.
There's no consequences to this. Just take the win and move on. Trump's team is saying there should be no sentencing. President Trump will continue to fight against these hoaxes until they're all dead. But at the end of the day, to Mondare's point, Trump is coming out on the upside of this in the sense that there are no consequences here.
Except
so
that he still
why
is
not
a criminal.
Just let it go?
Because he wants to erase
Clear
the
his
criminal
record.
from his record.
What about the other three jurisdictions in which he was indicted, right? The dozens of other felony counts for withholding, refusing to produce classified documents that he stole from the Oval
Office. Right, but they
Office.
dropped those. Those were
January
dismissed.
6th. Those were voluntarily dismissed after he won the election, and it became clear that pursuant to a DOJ memorandum, which has never really been tested in the court of law, that he wouldn't be able to be prosecuted anyway because he was about to return to the White House. That is not to say that those felony indictments were somehow without a basis. And throughout all of these prosecutions, no one has plausibly refuted the fact that he didn't commit the crimes that he has been indicted for.
But I think it's wow. That is not how this works. That is not how this works at all. That is what you have a trial for. Okay, which is to give the defense an opportunity to dispute the accusations. The fact that there is not going to be a trial, that doesn't mean that you get to say, well, I think that he was guilty, right? And the only reason he wasn't found guilty is because the charges were dismissed because he's becoming president. That's not how that works. That's not how that works, okay? The defense did not get an opportunity to prove that Trump is innocent, okay? So at the end of the day, it's a wash. There's no point in even bringing that up because we don't know either way whether or not Trump would have been found innocent or guilty. He didn't even get an opportunity to defend himself. So I'm just saying, these people, you can tell how pissed off they are. They're mad. They're upset because they feel like Trump is getting away. But, hey, ultimately at the end of the day, these cases were fraudulent in the first place. They shouldn't have been brought. So ultimately, the universe is just rectifying what was something that should have never happened in the first place.
better
Republican talking points.
that those cases, we don't know if he committed those crimes or not because they're not going to trial.
And he's
Actually, in this
innocent.
case,
And
we
he's
know he
innocent until
committed the
proven
crime.
guilty, by the way.
To be
now
clear, we actually do
have
know he did the
finality.
thing on January 6th. Like,
Well,
I lived through that. We all saw
until
that
he's
play
found
out.
guilty, we can't say that. But here, he
We
was
saw him
found
refuse
guilty.
to produce classified documents that he took from the Oval Office. I'm just saying, some of this stuff has been in plain sight.
A jury found him.
Yeah, and Biden taking classified documents in order to share information, classified information, with a ghostwriter to write his book. Yeah, we know he did that as well, too. The DOJ admitted that he did that, but they said, no, we can't prosecute him. One, because he's too old and senile. Two, because he's sitting president, right? So if that's the argument that this guy wants to use, then, hey, I don't know. Maybe we should be locking up Biden, right? Maybe we should be boohoo-whining and crying about Biden getting away with crimes and not being punished for it. So, yeah, I think that this is hilarious to me. And in my opinion, I think Trump should fight it, right? I don't think that this is a situation where you just take the W. No, you don't just take the W, because if you feel like you're innocent and that the trial was fraudulent, you don't just allow a felony to stay on your record, right? You just don't allow that. You fight it tooth and nail, you get it appealed, you get it overturned, and you make these people eat more crow. Okay, for all that talk about, oh, Trump was a convicted felon, blah, 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 blah. Just for the conviction to be overturned, there will be nothing sweeter than that. Nothing sweeter than that to close the chapter of these political witch hunts against Trump. So, hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share. At Black Conservative Perspective. Peace.